Good morning to the crew here and to the folks watching the video later. Hello. As we were just saying, a lot of our regulars are traveling this week. Some kind of trip to Nantucket, Cape Cod, somewhere there.
And others are recovered from the trip.
Yep. I guess some of our others just got back from out west and got one of those fun travel holds. So it's all right. They can all watch the video later too. So hi, regulars. We're going to continue looking at parables. But first, I was out last week because we had a parents meeting to talk about youth group activities and things like that. So I hit record. I left you in Roger's capable hands. And let's see, you had the parable of the wheat and the weeds. And then I think also the parable of the wise and foolish bridesmaids, right? So what did you talk about? I haven't had a chance to watch.
Yes.
You weren't here. Were you guys here? Go on, it's up to you. What did I miss? Give me the elevator version.
Well, Ron's did a good job.
Okay, that's good. That's good. What did you come up with some themes or modern day versions of the parables, or wheat and weeds or bridesmaids?
Well, the question I raised was, we was talking about forgiveness.
Yeah.
And both of those parables lead you to believe that it's one and done. I mean, you're either you're either right or you're wrong. There's no recovery.
Yeah, you're either thrown into the fire with weeds, or left out.
The bridesmaids, the bridesmaids get locked out. I mean, they're just.
Yeah. What did you all come up with to that question?
That was a question.
Okay. Well, let's ponder that together, but we've got another kind of all or nothing parable today. Sure. Okay, we've got one all or nothing parable today, but then there's another parable that might muddy the waters in a good way. Add in an element of, if not forgiveness, then a little bit of hope. So let's get through these, and we'll remember that parables are not the same as, say, Paul's letter to the Romans, right, where he's laying out arguments and, but what about this? Well, let me talk about that, right? Parables are often exaggerated, as we talked about, and each one is one view or facet or picture. But I do struggle with some of these, right? Where you finish the reading and it says, and you will be thrown out into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The gospel of the Lord. So I do struggle with those because so many other places Jesus talks about forgiveness, turning the other cheek, loving your enemies, caring for the least of these. Jesus came not to condemn the world, but in order that the world would be saved through him. And also we have these very either or. What did you say? One and done? Something like that. Yeah. So yeah, let's keep that question on display and in our hearts and see what we can do with it by the end of today. Did you come up with a modern day version or a today version of either of those parables? Wheat and weeds or foolish bridesmaids? Okay. Yeah, the bridesmaids one is weird. That's a very cultural thing. I don't remember if I shared it with Roger or not, but the tradition is that the groom would come to, no, I'm getting it backwards. One of the spouses would come to the other one's house for the start of the party and the banqueting, And the bridesmaids would be waiting there along with others. And then they would start almost like a procession or a parade back to the other house to start the new life. So maybe with that one, they don't get to be at the start of the party because they were foolish. But in theory, the party's heading back to the other house. So maybe they still get to join the parade. I don't know. That doesn't do much for the wheat and the weeds, though. The wheat and the weeds, I guess I am talking about it. The wheat and the weeds, I do have a theory, and I think I put that in for Roger. Did you all talk about the possibility that the wheat and weeds is an internal thing? So within yourself, you have wheat and weeds that have been planted, and you can't separate them until the last day. As opposed to your wheat, your wheat, your wheat, your wheat, right? That each person is either one or the other. Did you all talk about that? Okay. That could be one interpretation too, is that each person is a field that belongs to our master, and the enemy comes and sows some weeds in there, some sin. And we had that long study a while back about is it the devil that makes us do it, or is it our own choices? But either way, the temptations are so. And you can't, Luther said, we're simultaneously saints and sinners. Can't be one or the other in this life. But when the day comes, we will be made clean before we can enter into God's presence. We'll be purified, right? We'll be purged. That's where purgatory comes from. And the Catholic Church had the whole system and the years and all of that. But as far as Lutheran understanding goes, God just takes care of it, and we don't worry about the time frame or the location. So that's kind of something, for me, that's one possible interpretation of the wheat and the weeds, is that each person is a field, and at the end is when that separation, that sorting happens, the weeds are burned. So maybe that's correct. I don't know. Let's do another one. A lot of these are very much this or that. So this is a different flavor. We're gonna try Luke this time. We've been in Mark, we've been in Matthew. So today we're gonna do a couple of parables from Luke. And that'll be Luke chapter 16, 19 to 31. So Luke 16, starting at verse 19. I have a feeling this will be familiar. Would somebody want to read this one? It's a little long.
There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
Thank you. So, this, first of all, this completely destroys the Christmas Carol, right? Ebenezer Scrooge, he's saying, would not have repented like he did because those ghosts visited him. Marley coming back to get a little warning. So first of all, this doesn't start like other parables. This doesn't say the kingdom of God could be compared to, or the kingdom of heaven will be like. This just jumps right in. What details do you notice in terms of comparing and contrasting between Lazarus and the rich man? Before their deaths, they set up a good parallel here, side by side. What's the same? What's different?
One has everything, one has nothing.
Yeah, that sums it up. How about attire? What are they wearing?
Couple of mine and it's the rich man.
Yeah. What does Lazarus wear? Or I should say, what covers him? Swords. Yeah. So we know the story of Lydia in Acts, that purple cloth was expensive, it was good business for her. So this guy's wearing purple, and linen was not cheap either. He's got labors. What does Lazarus wear? Swords. Dog saliva. Okay. How about food?
Rich man has plenty of good food.
Sumptuous.
Yeah, I mean, the rich man ate to excess. Because there was leftovers that just fell from the table, that's what Lazarus ate, so he was eating what most of the dogs would eat.
Yeah. I understand the health rules, but I'm always troubled by the amount of food that restaurants have to throw away. For something. Yeah, there is plenty of food in this world. Nobody can go hungry. But the distribution and
Yeah, but apparently not toilet paper.
one little hint of a supply chain issue, yeah, boy, people.
Sarah came home from work, what, Wednesday and Thursday, furious because people were coming into Dollar General and buying $100 worth of toilet paper.
Did we not learn from 4 years ago, like it was okay?
Yeah.
You didn't need the stuff.
Man.
You gotta wonder who, somebody just maliciously started that rumor or how
Well, they were gonna strike, like they
it,
were.
well, but the toilet paper is domestically made, so they don't need the doctor.
I know. And I did wanna say. They came to an agreement. And they didn't fix everything, but they got. I understand there was a big difference between West Coast and East Coast. But they said, you know what? We're not gonna draw this out after the hurricane. Like there's bigger problems. So we still need to address this, and we'll come back to some of the other issues. But I really appreciated that they were like, you know what? We see the devastation, we know how people are hurting, so let's get this part done and get on with it. So, anyway, digress. I don't know if there's any significance to the fact that the rich man has no name, but Lazarus does. I don't know. I don't believe that there's any connection to Lazarus from John's Gospel, who's raised from the dead by Jesus. But I don't know. You almost names are significant, right? Jesus's name is basically in Hebrew would have been Joshua, and it means he saves. Joshua was the one, not Moses, who got to cross into the promised land, who led the people there. So that there's not coincidences usually when it comes to names. So I can't help but wonder, what John came later, theory, in terms of when it was written. So if this story of Lazarus and the rich man was out there, is it a coincidence then that Mary and Martha's brother is named Lazarus. This Lazarus who suffered is now being, what was it, is now being comforted, is that what it said? And then you have the other Lazarus who's brought back from the dead. So yeah, you can't get a much bigger contrast here. Poor man died and is carried away by the angels to be with Abraham, who received the first covenant. Direct. I know received a covenant along with all of creation, but Abraham was the first, and one-on-one. And then Lazarus ends up in Hades, being tormented. One other thing to point out, because I've been trying to look at the social science, history, culture pieces. Just one more layer is it says at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus. So a city could have walls of protection. A certain neighborhood, which is still the case today, might have a fence or something or a wall around it for the upper echelons, right? To have a little extra protection. And this rich man's house even had its own wall with a gate. So Lazarus couldn't even go in. It was common to have beggars hang out around these neighborhoods because they had the means, they had the resources. So you'd go there and ask for help, or just be out there and say like, "Poor widow, orphan, like, help me." And so they put walls up to, keep them at a distance. So there's a lot going on. Very, very clear contrast. Do you have any personal experiences with folks asking for help, for handouts, beggars, whatever you want, however you want to say it? What experiences have you had? How did it feel? How did it go?
The alien kids made up little bags and stuff in it. Remember hanging out about a dozen of those that would drive around the city. Most of them were pretty grateful, only ran into one who was ungrateful. So let's get ahead for me, card, give money.
Yeah.
But if all the rest of them were receptive, seemed appreciative.
Have you ever had an experience where you met somebody and you didn't have something to give them?
Well, probably not time to stop like look the other way.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of, if you give money, are they gonna use it for something that would be harmful? Is the person scamming? I've had those before where there was a van in a parking lot of a store and there's a woman up front playing her violin on an amp, and we've got 6 kids in there, and the kids are kind of sitting out there looking for Lauren, and you can't help but wonder, like, well, I have a really nice amplifier, and an electric violin. Maybe you couldn't have, maybe something happened, a health issue, or who knows, maybe you lost your house, so you kept this to make money, but sometimes things feel a little fishy, and sometimes you just don't have something on you. So it's easier to just look away. Gentlemen down there, what we got?
Several times when we'd be here working at the church on a weekend or Saturday or whatever, we'd be approached by folks that claim to have issues, and we learned rather quickly not to give them just money. But if they said they just needed money for gas, take them across the street, put gas in their car or whatever, and not just hand them $20.
Yeah.
Just to make sure it was legitimate.
Sometimes there are scammers who will hit every congregation in the area, playing on their goodwill, if you're taught by the Bible to help. And then sometimes there's folks who really need help. It's hard to tell the difference. California, we had there was a big fairly significant homeless population. The weather was decent most of the year, get really hot, but didn't get freezing cold. So where we were, there was always some passing through, some regulars. There was always folks out and about. So we'd have water, granola bars, cars. But yeah, it's uncomfortable. Have anybody ever been out of the country where you get a different kind of
Yeah.
feel? Oh, you've been to India.
It's, you don't think. Even our people that are, yes, for handouts, better than the people there, they're just, it's poverty everywhere.
Mhm.
And the trash. Trash everywhere. Trash everywhere.
Yeah.
And then people, no legs,
Mhm.
sitting on the street begging.
That sounds more biblical.
It's not. I went to Sri Lanka, same way. But the people are lovely and friendly and
Yeah.
happy and give you anything, give you shirt off their back. It's crazy.
That's a really interesting mix. So go ahead.
Probably, so we went to Mexico, in a similar situation, you'd be where you're supposed to be, you need to go a block, two over. So.
Yeah.
Totally different.
I've been to places where you gotta look out for pickpockets, and I've been to places where it's all tourists all the time, and they'll just overcharge you, but they're not gonna. You don't see the poverty like you said, like it's tucked away so it doesn't hurt the tourism. As we think of ways to tell this story today, maybe this one we don't need to tweak too much based on what some of you have shared. I just want to get you into that feeling, that mindset of experiences that you've had, encountering people who are poor, who are destitute.
Well, it's kind of a message of hope too. Just, better things to come.
Yeah. But then we have that term at the end, right? So better things to come, right? That's Christianity tends to thrive most in places where there's a lot of suffering, pain, war, disease, because it offers hope. But there's that turn at the end where Lazarus says, well, please go tell my brothers. I don't want this to happen to them.
Rich man.
What's that?
You said, well.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Rich man's brothers, yeah. He needs a name. Maybe he doesn't have a name on purpose. Maybe he just the everyman. Okay? So warn my brothers, I don't want this to happen to them. And Abraham's reply is they've been told. Right? They have Moses, they have the prophets. Well, even if you're not going to go scripture, there's conscience, right? There's a golden rule. There's programs, there's efforts, charities, government trying to help people in need. So,
Also a foreshadowing of things to come.
right, a lot of the Gospels is about reversal. I think of Mary's song. You have cast the mighty down from their thrones, you lifted up the lowly. Yeah.
We were in Walmart where the guy had some religious license plate, so. But then he was parking my car going on in and out, and then by the time we got to the door, said, oh, could you give me $5 for gas? And just hit us right in the parking lot. I'm not just stopping.
A couple of weeks.
He was, praise the Lord, this, that, and the other, and it was just like a regular conversation. And he thought it was,
Evangelizing.
it was evangelizing, and then you get up there, oh, by the way, can you give me some money for gas? Well, those are ones always concerning, the one down in street corner, you pick a semi together, and you get hit in the parking lot.
Yeah.
I've been hitting the parking lot, so.
I will confess, it's something I struggled with 17 years now in this job.
Yeah.
I've encountered the scammers. And I've encountered the folks in real need, and sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference, and I hate.
Yeah.
The feeling of needing to be suspicious. But
Ah,
it's probably not new.
no,
So, okay. The Bible is pretty consistent, both testaments, when it comes to this type of thing. Both testaments, Jesus, John the Baptist, maybe Paul not so much, but James for sure. You get into the prophets, Amos, Micah, you get into some of the laws and Leviticus and that, where you could take care of the widows and the orphans and the aliens, and you have the year of Jubilee where you restore people's lands and things like that. There's a lot of concern in the Bible about rich and poor. And about, Jesus says it's harder for a rich person. What is it? It's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So there's a lot of concern there, and I know sometimes if I've written those things up in my years in the ministry, I will make people uncomfortable. Are you talking about me? Am I saying I'm the rich guy here? I'm generous. I do my part. Oh, I'm just saying, just share what it says. So but it's pretty consistent in both testaments that the rich are more prone to falling into this trap and not caring for. God seems to side with the poor and the vulnerable and the widows and the orphans over and over and over again. There's a lot of stuff that people want to talk about. They'll cite the Bible on it to prove their case. But boy, this one has a strong thread. And I don't know if that always gets the same amount of airtime. Partly because it seems like an impossible problem, right? Forever. Even Jesus says, the poor you'll have with you forever, right? It's the wheat and the weeds, right? It's in this life, there's going to be sin and there's going to be problems. But does that mean you just throw up your hands and say, que sera, sera, sort it out in heaven? Or do you listen to Moses and the prophets and try to address it now? But this is a very consistent theme.
Well, this rich man doesn't seem like he wants to share, but then there are rich people who are very philanthropic.
Yeah, very much. There are churches with endowments, right? Big funds that generate thousands, if not more, hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest that they can give away to fund scholarships and homeless campaigns. Then we'll, $500,000 is sitting there. Maybe use that too. Like, what does that say? And I understand the benefit of an endowment, but are we building a wall with a gate? Well, we'll give you the crumbs from our investment, the interest. Is that valid, or am I getting too much? I'm just throwing it out there. Where's the line? And there's a lot of studies that say that people with the least amount proportionately are more generous. What does that say? There's also a very real thing. Have you heard of compassion fatigue? Have you heard of that? Compassion fatigue. So nowadays, like with the news, we also get to hear about way more troubling situations of people in need, local, national, global, countries, wars, cancer, car accidents, GoFundMe pages, right? So the needs are out there all the time, or maybe in your own life, you're having to take care of somebody or help somebody through their problems or their illnesses. And there's this thing called compassion fatigue. It happens to social workers a lot. There's a lot of turnover in the social worker industry because some people still might be trying to game the system, but they're really seeing the folks that are falling through the cracks. who maybe make a little bit of money, but not enough to qualify for some things, or who everything collapsed and they're just out of options now. And a lot of social workers, we had a member, a council member in our last congregation who lasted about a decade longer than most other folks in her field, and she, right as we were leaving, switching, she just couldn't do it anymore. Because you just see these people hurting all the time, and you kind of hit a limit of how much you can just carry. So that's another thing too. There's a difference between withholding compassion, like just being a jerk, or having compassion fatigue, where you can't help everybody, and so you start to shut down. That's why it needs to be everybody, not just a couple of people doing all the. And so then this guy had a gate. He had a door that he could close. What is our accessibility in terms of people who are in need? And again, it could be your own family. I know a lot of folks expend a lot of effort and energy and compassion and empathy with their own family members. And then what do you have left in the tank? Or just in general, what is your accessibility? Somebody sitting there with a sign on the street. Somebody comes and knocks on the door here at church. What barriers do we put up to them? Some of them for our own protection. So keeping that in mind, that's our present day situation. So you kind of get in the mindset of what it is like to encounter somebody who's asking for help, who's begging like Lazarus. We see how it'll play out very consistently in scripture, God's attitudes towards rich and poor, and who's going to be, the last will be first and the first will be last, right? Look at what Lazarus is doing. He's getting comforted. So all of this stuff together, how do we tell this story for today? How would we tell this parable for today? We need to
Be a little more current topic.
That we have to be careful. I will tell you that, when the Bible study, a week and a half ago, someone came in, this was a large group, the daytime, and someone came in and said, one of the members came in and sat down and said, I've got an idea. Would women's Bible study like to do the blessings bags to hand out? Is that something we would think about?
Oh, like Gordon was talking.
Yes, yes. And somebody said, you know, it is illegal to give things to the people on the streets in Hanover County. What? That is what was said. And we all looked at each other and said, maybe money, but you can give food and goods, surely. And this person said, it is illegal. And the person who came in and was willing to work with others to do something was just not flat over. I could see how disappointed she was. And I said, you know, let's get together and talk to Sharon Adair on social ministry committee. And we can work this out. Don't be disappointed because one person was not interested. We will get it worked out, so.
Maybe there's ways to work around it. Maybe there's already ways out there to help.
Yeah.
And you know, there are some times, and I will go on the record saying this, there are some times, and it would be good to understand where that all came from. Usually there's an origin for it.
Probably a safety thing.
It could be, and that's very much legitimate. But there are also times where you say, I'm going to do this anyway. There was a very famous story of, shoot, I think it was in Florida somewhere. There was a church that had, for years, maybe decades, done this feeding ministry in a park. And they changed the rules because they didn't want all these undesirable people in the park. And they're like, no, you're not allowed to feed people out in public spaces. And the pastor got himself arrested because they're like, we're gonna keep feeding people. Think of civil rights. How many clergy from up north and down south ended up in jail for pushing back against things? Now, I'm not saying this law is on the same level as Jim Crow. But unless there's a legitimate reason for it, that's another conversation to have. How do we help these folks anyway?
I want to say, it's been a few years ago, but I want to say something similar to that happened right here in Richmond.
Really?
It was a church doing ministry in Midtown or, you know, one of the four sections, and something happened and the law was changed and stuff. Or there was a law in the books and somebody realized it and tried to enforce it, and it was just, I mean, I think they worked it all out in the end, but I mean, it was ugly there for a while.
But there's always plenty of people that don't want you to help. The individuals or needing.
Out of sight, out of mind, right? Or it's their own fault, they're in that situation, right? We're the country of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Sometimes you bought a pair of boots and they were poorly made, you go to pull and it just rips right off. So, this is a challenging parable. Because it's hard to ignore what it's saying. It's pretty clear. This is still very much an either or thing, right? That they set it up that way. They set up this big contrast. Well, the rich guy didn't do anything, and now he's here, and Lazarus couldn't do anything. Now he's here.
Would you draw a parallel between this and our old friend, Job?
We draw a parallel between this and Job. So Job is Lazarus and Job in this situation.
I don't think Job, he would be the rich man.
Oh. Well, Job would be both, wouldn't he?
Hmm?
Job would be both. Job would start as the rich man, except with the exception that Job was also generous.
Well, that's what I mean,
Yeah. But then Job, because of the whole, well, let's test him and see how strong his faith really is, ends up as low as Lazarus, if not lower. He's sitting there with sores, scraping himself, shards of pottery. How do you think dogs are coming up to him? That's an interesting question. What would your response be?
I don't know, I was just thinking, you know, wasn't thinking so much about when he was in disgrace, so to speak, but,
Okay.
you know, that he was a, because from all appearances in the way the story is presented,
Mhm.
you know, he was generous, he was, you know, kind, he acted as a,
Oh, yeah, like.
justice of the peace.
Yeah.
You know, and he was fair in his rulings and stuff like that, so, you know, but then he was tormented, so to speak. And,
Yeah.
you know, cast down, of course, he came back, but again, that would, like you said, that, you know, he could go from being a rich man to Lazarus and back to the arms of Abraham, so to speak.
And the study we did on Job, that Stars Beneath This book, said this was a reality check for Job to say, you might be the best human on the planet, but you're still not God.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. That's an interesting question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Maybe we're teaching us two different things that are connected. But as far as this one goes, we'll get to our second parable next week.
Don't lose faith in God regardless of the circumstance. Lazarus never lost faith.
Yeah.
Job never lost faith.
The rich man's issue here was he wasn't listening to Moses or the prophets. He wasn't, to use Jesus's words from Matthew 25, he wasn't seeing God in the least of these as this person having any value. I don't know, but this is again a very either or. what do we do with that? Okay. Next week, we're going to start with the persistent widow. Remember that parable? There's a widow who has a wrong and she just keeps going up to this judge, and this judge is very upfront that he's not a people person, he doesn't care, but he eventually intervenes on her behalf just to get her to leave him alone. So that's a weird parable, right? Is God the judge here who's not listening? Like, this one isn't an either or. This one speaks about persistence. So, well, it'll be interesting to bring that into the conversation we've been having about wheat and weeds, about the foolish or wise bridesmaids, about even Lazarus and the rich man. A lot of these are just showing the extremes. This one is somewhere in the middle. So we'll see how that enters the mix. Thank you for sharing your stories and your thoughts. And for just being uncomfortable today with this parable, because I think that's what its job is to keep you from getting too comfortable, too insulated, too behind your gates. And remember that there are Lazaruses out there. What are you gonna do? I'm really glad that we can respond as individuals, but even more so that we, as a community, are called to respond. And we do a lot of good work in communities through things like MSEP and that, but it keeps you from getting too comfortable. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.